Story 1. She learned how to sound like us. This story was shared with me quietly. No name attached. No follow-up questions. Some people don't want answers. They just want to stop carrying it alone. My name is Emily. The first time it happened, I thought I heard my brother calling me from the other side of the room. That wouldn't have mattered, except I could see him standing right in front of me. That contradiction stayed with me longer than the sound itself. We were staying in a place where noise never behaved the way it should. Not loud, not soft, just delayed enough to make you doubt where it came from. And when you live like that long enough, you start trusting voices more than your eyes. That night, I heard my brother call my name from behind the closet door. The exact tone, the exact timing, the same way he always did when he wanted me to come over. My body reacted before my thoughts did. That sound meant safety. I answered without turning around, and that was when I heard my real brother answer me back from across the room. Neither of us breathed, because if he was there, and the voice was in the closet, then who was practicing my name? Same tone, same timing. For a moment, neither of us moved. The voice behind the door didn't stop. It said my name again. Slower this time. Not distorted. Not wrong. Just careful. Like it was listening to how we reacted and adjusting. My chest tightened. Not from fear yet. From confusion. Confusion keeps you still while your mind tries to fix what it doesn't understand. My brother told me not to answer again. His voice sounded strained, like saying it out loud might make it real. We stayed quiet. The voice didn't disappear. It waited. That was the first night we realized it could imitate more than sound. It could imitate intention. After that, it changed its approach. It didn't call directly anymore. It used routine instead. The scrape of fabric, the sound of weight shifting, the breath someone takes when they think they're alone. Sometimes it sounded like my brother, sometimes like me, sometimes like neither. Just the idea that someone else was close enough to notice. It learned quickly. When we were tired, when we were distracted, when the house was quiet enough that sound became important. That's when it moved closer. I started hearing it in places that didn't make sense. The hallway, when no one was there. The bathroom, when the door was open. The closet again. Always the closet. It learned that doors make people hesitate at night. The pauses became more accurate. The breathing matched better. The timing sharpened. It wasn't guessing anymore. It was practicing. We stopped responding out loud. That didn't slow it down, because it wasn't waiting for answers. It was studying reactions. How long it took us to turn. How our voices changed when we tried to sound calm. There's a moment that still doesn't sit right with me. My brother was in the shower. I heard him speak from the hallway, using my voice. He asked if he was done. I stood there, listening to myself speak, without moving my mouth. That was when I understood something important. It wasn't copying people. It was copying presence. And it was getting better every time we reacted. From then on, the house felt smaller. Not because it changed, because sound filled it differently. Like there was no empty space left that hadn't been tested. We avoided being alone. Not because it attacked, because isolation made it bolder. Togetherness confused it, like it needed separation to work properly. Silence didn't help either. Silence made it creative. Chairs shifted, doors settled, floorboards bent under weight that wasn't there. And every time it happened, it sounded closer than it should have been. The worst part? It never rushed. It never demanded attention. It just waited until it knew we were listening. I started noticing how it behaved when it thought it wasn't being observed. That detail mattered more than anything else. When we moved through the house together, the sounds stayed distant, almost polite. But the moment one of us stepped away, the house filled with small noises that felt placed, not accidental. It learned our schedules faster than we expected. When my brother showered, when I stayed up later, when the house was quiet enough that even breathing sounded loud, it used those moments carefully. Never too much, never enough to make us scream. I stopped trusting my own reactions. Sometimes I would freeze without knowing why, and then realize I'd heard something familiar without consciously registering it. That's how it worked. It slipped past awareness and settled in your body first. We tried sleeping with the lights on. Light didn't stop it. Light just showed us how empty the rooms really were. And emptiness made the sounds stand out more. I remember lying awake, listening to breathing that wasn't mine. It matched my rhythm, slowed when I slowed, sped up when I tried to calm myself. That was the first time it felt like it was inside the room with me, not in the walls. My brother started hearing it too, even when I wasn't there. That's when we stopped pretending it was something we could ignore, because it had learned how to separate us mentally, even when we were standing next to each other. One night, we both heard our mother call us from the kitchen, the exact tone she used when she was annoyed. We both moved at the same time, then stopped. She wasn't home. The voice repeated itself, slightly off in timing, like it had memorized the words, but not the impatience behind them. That's when I realized it wasn't just copying us, it was cataloging us. Not just how we sounded, but how we felt when we spoke. After that, we stopped reacting completely. No answers, no movement, no acknowledgement. For a while, the house went quiet, long enough that I thought maybe it had lost interest. It hadn't. It was waiting for us to forget, because forgetting was the only moment it could use without resistance. The first time it followed us outside, I didn't understand what was happening. The sound was wrong. It echoed where it shouldn't have, and carried farther than it should have. We were walking together. I heard my brother call my name from behind, even though he was beside me. When I turned, the voice repeated itself, closer this time. That's when I knew it wasn't tied to the house anymore. It had learned how to move with us. From then on, it didn't need walls or doors. It used distance instead. Parking lots, stairwells, empty spaces where sound stretches and bends. Sometimes I heard footsteps matching mine, half a step behind. Sometimes I heard my own voice ahead of me, saying nothing important, just enough to make me look. It never showed itself fully, not because it couldn't, because it didn't need to. Recognition was enough. I don't know when it stopped imitating my brother and started using me more often, but I noticed people reacting to things I hadn't said, answering questions I hadn't asked. Once, someone responded to my voice from across a room, and I hadn't spoken at all. That's when I understood something I still don't like thinking about. It wasn't following us to scare us. It was following us to be used. Eventually, we stopped talking about it, even to each other. Acknowledging it made it more precise. Ignoring it made it patient. I don't know where my brother stands with it now. We don't stay in the same place long enough to test it, and we don't call each other unless we have to. I still hear familiar voices sometimes when I'm alone. Not calling out, just existing nearby, like someone sharing space without asking. And if you're listening to this, and you've ever heard someone you trust speak from somewhere they shouldn't have been, pay attention to how carefully the sound was made. Because once something learns how to sound like you, it stops needing you to stay close. Story 2. The House That Chose My Aunt. My name is Rachel. I never believed in possession. Not really. Not until I saw my aunt lift something she should not have been able to move, and smile like it didn't cost her any effort at all. She had always been strict, not cruel, just firm. The kind of person who didn't raise her voice because she didn't need to. When she spoke, people listened. She rarely repeated herself. That consistency was the first thing that disappeared. The change didn't happen fast, and that's what made it dangerous. Slow changes give you time to explain them away. They give you time to convince yourself you're overreacting. At first, it was her sleep. She stopped resting properly, waking up tired, sitting in silence longer than usual, staring at corners of rooms, like she was waiting for something to finish, speaking before she moved again. Then it was her strength. She started moving furniture by herself, things she had always asked for help with before. When we pointed it out, she brushed it off, like it wasn't worth noticing, like the effort didn't even register. That's when the house started to change too. Not darker, not colder, just aware. Sound didn't bounce the same way anymore. It felt like noise stopped leaving once it entered. At night, we heard movement that didn't belong to anyone. Slow, heavy, deliberate, not trying to hide, not trying to be loud either. Just present. When we asked her about it, she said, "The house settles at night." She said it the same way every time, word for word, like something she had practiced until it sounded natural. The first time I felt real fear was during an argument. She grabbed my wrist, not hard, not angry, just firm. I tried to pull away. I couldn't. Her grip didn't shake. Her breathing didn't change. She smiled while holding me, like she wanted me to understand something, without saying it. That smile didn't belong to her. After that, things escalated faster. Not suddenly, with purpose. Like something had realized it didn't need to pretend anymore. She started speaking in a different rhythm, slower, heavier, like each word was being chosen by someone who had just learned how to use her mouth. Sometimes she spoke to people who weren't there, responding to questions no one had asked, nodding slightly, like she was listening to instructions. The house reacted with her. Doors opened on their own. Objects shifted. Sounds followed her through rooms, like the space itself was paying attention and adjusting. We brought people to help her, not doctors, not at first. People who believed in prayer, in cleansing, in protection. They came confident. They left quieter. One of them told us the house didn't feel empty, that whatever was there hadn't arrived recently. It had been waiting long enough to settle. When he said that, my aunt smiled, like it wasn't new information. When they tried to pray, she laughed. Not loud, not mocking, just amused. She told them they were standing in the wrong place. That's when I realized she knew things she shouldn't have known. Details about people she had never met, fears they had never spoken out loud. She used that knowledge gently, never as a threat, just enough to let them know she was aware. At night, the sounds became clearer, voices layered on top of each other, speaking through her mouth, overlapping slightly, like the timing hadn't been fully decided yet. Children in the family stopped wanting to visit. They said the house felt crowded, even when no one else was there. One night, I saw her standing in the hallway, completely still, facing the wall, whispering softly. When I asked who she was talking to, she turned slowly and said, "The house doesn't like to be ignored." That was when I understood something important. It wasn't just using her anymore. It belonged there, and she was part of how it stayed present. When things finally broke, it wasn't violent. It was quiet. She sat down in the living room and refused to stand again. She said the house didn't want her to leave. She said she was tired of fighting something that never sleeps. We moved her out eventually, not forcefully, not dramatically, quietly, like people leaving a place they know doesn't want them anymore. The moment she left, the house didn't relax. It tightened, like something had been interrupted mid-sentence. After that night, I stopped visiting the house alone. Being there felt like standing inside something that was listening back. The silence wasn't empty. It was arranged, like everything had its place, like it knew when to stay still and when to move. My aunt's behavior settled into something consistent, and that consistency was worse than chaos, because it meant whatever had been inside her had learned enough to stop improvising. She followed routines. She cleaned. She cooked. She sat in the same chair every evening. She spoke less, but when she did, the words felt heavier, like they stayed in the room longer than they should have. I noticed the house reacted to her moods. When she was calm, the rooms felt tight. When she was irritated, objects shifted slightly, like the walls were adjusting themselves around her. We tried bringing help again. Different people, different approaches. Every time someone stepped inside, they hesitated at the doorway, like their body knew something their mind hadn't caught up to yet. One man refused to enter at all. He said the house felt full, that there was no space left for him. Another stayed long enough to speak with her. He left pale and quiet. He told us the presence wasn't aggressive. It was established, and that made it harder to remove. My aunt listened to all of it without reacting, like she already knew the outcome, like she didn't feel the need to argue. At night, I stayed awake listening through the walls. Not footsteps exactly. Pressure. Movement without direction. Like something shifting its weight slowly across the structure. Sometimes I heard voices overlapping. Not words, just cadence. Conversation without language. When I focused too hard, my head started to ache. That's when I realized something else. The house wasn't amplifying her. She was grounding it. Whatever was there needed her stable. To stay present. The breaking point came quietly. Like everything else. She stopped eating. Stopped asking for anything. When we asked if she was in pain, she smiled softly and said, "The house will take care of that." She started standing in rooms that weren't hers, touching the walls gently, like she was checking something beneath the surface. One night, I found her in the basement, sitting on the floor, hands flat against the concrete, eyes closed, breathing slow and even. When I asked what she was doing, she said one word: listening. That's when I understood the truth. The house was not a container. It was a participant. We moved her out after that. And even now, when I pass by the house, the rooms still feel wrong. The sounds stay close. Sometimes I swear I hear her voice from inside, speaking calmly, like she never left. The worst part isn't what happened to her. The worst part is knowing whatever learned how to use her is still there, waiting, not for her, for someone else strong enough to stay. Story 3: The Cave That Answered Back. My name is Thomas. The mistake wasn't going there. The mistake was assuming the place was empty, just because no one lived there anymore. Silence like that is never neutral. It's just waiting. We didn't go looking for anything strange, and that matters. People think curiosity always means intention. Sometimes it just means you didn't expect the quiet to respond. There were 3 of us. None of us spoke much on the way in. The path already felt wrong, not blocked, not dangerous, just off. Like sound didn't travel as far as it should have. Like every step stayed behind us longer than normal. The opening was low and wide, dark enough that you had to lean forward to see inside. The air coming out felt old, not cold, held in place, like it had been breathing the same breath for a long time. At first, everything felt normal. We joked lightly, tested echoes, threw small stones, listened as they rolled away. When nothing happened, we relaxed too quickly, because nothing happening feels like confirmation, even when it shouldn't. The deeper we went, the more the space seemed to narrow, not physically, in attention, like every sound mattered more, and mistakes had less room to disappear. Our lights didn't fail, they just felt weaker, like the darkness wasn't reflecting them back. It was absorbing them. I remember thinking the dock ahead didn't move the way darkness usually does. It waited. When the tunnel bent, the sound changed, not echoing back immediately, returning late, like it had taken a longer route to reach us. That delay was the first thing that made my stomach tighten. Then we heard it, a voice, not loud, not close, but clear enough to know it was speech, without being able to understand the words. For a second, I thought one of us had spoken. Then, I realized all of our mouths were closed. The sound came again, slower this time, like it was checking if we were paying attention. No one answered. It repeated itself, almost the same, not quite, like someone copying from memory. One of us laughed nervously, said it was probably water, or air moving through stone. Even as he said it, his voice sounded wrong in that space, like it didn't belong there anymore. We kept moving. Turning around felt like admitting something none of us were ready to name. The cave seemed to accept that decision. The tunnel widened slightly. The air felt easier. That should have been a warning. We took it as permission. The voice returned. Closer now. This time, it used my name. Not perfectly. Close enough. My body reacted before my mind did. I turned, even though I knew there was nothing behind us. The voice repeated it, adjusted the rhythm, improved slightly, like it was calibrating. That's when I realized something important. It wasn't calling for help. It wasn't trying to scare us. It was practicing. We stopped moving without agreeing to it. Stood there listening as the cave settled around us. When the voice came again, it didn't come from one direction. It came from several, overlapping slightly, like the timing hadn't been decided yet. One of the others whispered that we should leave. The moment he said it, the voice repeated his whisper back to him. Softer, slower, like it wanted him to hear himself. From somewhere else, we moved faster. Not running, close. The cave responded, not collapsing, not shifting, answering footsteps with footsteps, breath with breath, matching our pace too closely. That's when time started to feel wrong. Seconds stretched, then snapped back. Distance between steps became hard to measure. The space behind us felt longer than it should have been, like the tunnel was extending while we weren't looking. We reached a wider chamber, stopped. The ground felt different there, smoother, worn down, like something had passed through it often enough to change it. In the center was a darker shape, not carved, not placed, just present, like the light avoided it on purpose. The voice went silent. That silence pressed harder than the sound ever had. It felt intentional, like it had learned everything it needed. My light kept pointing toward the shape, like my hand wasn't fully under my control anymore. One of the others stepped forward slowly. The voice returned. This time, it came from the chamber itself, like the stone was speaking through a mouth it didn't have. It said his name, closer than it had said mine. That detail mattered. It meant it was learning fast. It meant we weren't the first people to give it time. We backed away together. The voice stayed with us, not chasing, not rushing, just keeping pace. When we reached the bend back to the narrow tunnel, it repeated the sound of our footsteps, delayed just enough to make the rhythm feel wrong. My light flickered, not off, unstable. For a moment, the tunnel ahead looked longer than it should have been, like it stretched, then snapped back. That snap felt like waking up mid-fall. The voice spoke again, used a phrase I had said earlier, something meaningless, a small joke. Hearing it again stripped it of any humor. It sounded like a recording, played in the wrong place. When we finally reached the entrance, daylight didn't feel like relief. It felt watched, like the cave had opened its mouth, and the world had simply continued from there. We didn't talk on the way back. Words felt unsafe. Silence wasn't empty either. It felt crowded, like something had followed us. Not physically, as a pattern. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time the room got quiet enough, I thought I could hear it again. Not as a place, as a tone. A low pressure behind normal sound. When I noticed a corner of my room staying darker than it should have been, my chest tightened. I heard my name, spoken calmly, from that direction, like someone who knew I was awake. I didn't respond. It waited, then repeated it, slower, adjusting the same way it had inside the cave. The next day, one of the others told me something that made my stomach drop. His sister had called him, asked why he had whispered her name in the middle of the night, and then hung up. His call log showed nothing. She said the voice sounded like him, but careful, like it was practicing. After that, we started noticing it everywhere. The way time felt wrong in certain rooms. The way hallways seemed longer on some nights. The way doors resisted being closed, like air pressure holding them open. One evening, a family member asked why I kept calling his name from the hallway. I was sitting right there at the table. When I laughed too quickly, the laugh was repeated back. Half a second later, same tone. No warmth. No one went to check. We all sat still, pretended the silence was normal, until normal returned enough to breathe again. That's when I understood the truth. The cave hadn't followed us. It had taught something how to follow. And it didn't need darkness or stone anymore. It only needed recognition. I avoid caves now, tunnels, narrow spaces, not because they scare me, because those are the places where sound learns without interruption. Once something learns your voice, it doesn't need the cave anymore. It can build the cave anywhere you are. I started paying attention to things I'd never questioned before. Not sounds. The way silence behaved, how it settled differently depending on where I stood. Certain places felt heavier, not threatening, aware, like they were holding onto something they hadn't decided what to do with yet. I stopped answering my phone at night. Sometimes it would ring once and stop. There was never a missed call, but the sound stayed with me, like it had been placed deliberately. When I did answer calls during the day, I listened closely, not for words, for timing. Timing is the hardest thing to copy. Once you hear it wrong, you never forget it. Sometimes conversations felt slightly delayed, responses coming a fraction of a second too late. Those moments stayed with me longer than anything said. I stopped leaving rooms abruptly. Sudden movement felt like it triggered something subtle, like a shift in pressure, like I had been expected to stay longer. One night, I heard movement in my apartment. It matched my pace exactly. Every step I took echoed back. Half a beat later, when I stopped, it stopped too. Not immediately. With hesitation, deliberate. I stood there long enough to understand something else. It wasn't following my position. It was following my pattern. Sleep became unreliable. Dreams bled into waking moments. I would hear my name just before falling asleep. Clear, calm, like someone confirming I was still there. I stopped reacting to it. That helped, but only in the way ignoring a problem helps. It doesn't remove it. It teaches it patience. People around me started mentioning things casually, asking if I had called them earlier, asking if I had been nearby. Each time, the description was the same. They said the voice sounded like me, but careful, like it was being used for the first time. I tried to test it once, changed my routine, spoke differently, moved differently, broke habits I'd kept for years. For a while, the sounds stopped, then they returned, adjusted, improved, closer. That's when I understood something I wish I hadn't. It wasn't copying my actions. It was copying my responses, and responses are harder to erase. The idea that something could learn you without ever touching you settled into my life slowly. Once it was there, it never fully left. I don't talk about the cave anymore, not because I'm afraid people won't believe me, because saying it out loud gives shape to something that works better without one. I avoid places where sound lingers, long corridors, underground spaces, stairwells at night, not because I expect it to be there, because those are the places where it learns fastest. Sometimes, when I hear my name now, I wait before turning, not out of fear, out of caution. Because the difference between safety and recognition is often only timing. And if you ever find yourself somewhere quiet enough that your own voice feels out of place, pay attention to how the silence reacts. Because once something learns how you sound, it doesn't need to follow you. It already knows when you're there. This concludes tonight's stories on Tales of the Darkness. If you're still listening, it means the silence around you hasn't felt empty for a while. And that's usually when it starts. These stories don't end when the video does. They linger in familiar rooms. They repeat sounds you recognize. They wait for the moment when the lights go out and nothing seems to move. So tonight, pay attention to doors you don't remember opening, to sounds that feel a second too close, to quiet moments that seem to be listening back. If you want more stories like these, subscribe to Tales of the Darkness. New stories arrive regularly, and they always know when you're alone. Good night.